"They told us we wouldn't get here," King called out that afternoon. "And there were those who said that we would get here only over their dead bodies." Already he strayed from lyrical, prepared remarks about their long march from Selma, through desolate valleys and across the trying hills, to claim validation for the competent and concrete result. "But all the world today knows that we are here," he declared extemporaneously. "And we are standing before the forces of power in the state of Alabama, saying, we ain't gonna let nobody turn us around."
Race is such a two-faced genus. On the one hand, it makes people nervous. On the other hand, it is the gateway to great discovery, because it is the key to how we live out our principles or don't live out our principles all through American history. And so, to me, the key thing is kind of building up your incentive and your comfort to be uncomfortable, to push across boundaries. And that once you do that, you get hooked on the sense of discovery, because you'll constantly be finding things that you didn't know.
Taylor Branch is an amazing writer and scholar who spent more than 2 decades putting together the masterpiece of the King years, a trilogy of the civil rights movement.
The power of the books is how honest they are. Obviously, this is somebody who was in deep sympathy with the movement. He participated in the movement. He wanted to understand it in all of its facets, and I really admire the honesty of what he's accomplished as a historian.
Because his research is so stunning and his writing is so accessible, that this is the way that I'm convinced that future generations are going to learn about the civil rights period of our history.
There were cries about whether the raiding party would lay siege or actually invade the sanctuary, and Harrison, preaching in skitters to fathom what might happen, said he had been braced for phone threats, night riders, almost any persecution short of assault on a Sunday service. But now he understood the saying that bad surprises in Lowndes could outstrip your fears.
When you spend 24 years chronicling something like the civil rights movement, I asked him, I said, what sent you on that journey? And he said, well, I got involved in some of that stuff as a kid, and I wanted to figure out what it was that made it matter to me. He needed to pick it up and examine it in all of its facets to figure out why it mattered to him to go south and to participate in the movement. It makes perfect sense when you know him that it would be grounded in a personal curiosity.
Openness made the sun unexpectedly cruel, so that 250 of the marchers needed medical treatment by nightfall for sunburn and heat stroke. King removed his green marching hat with ear flaps and placed it on John Lewis, saying he needed to protect his shaved head wound from Bloody Sunday. Negro teenagers wrote "Vote" on their foreheads with thick white sun cream. Sister Mary Leoline of Kansas City, the only nun to walk the whole way, wilted inside a layered habit with a starched wimple that framed her round face. Jim Leatherer, a settlement house worker from Saginaw, Michigan, hopped on one leg with crutches, hands and armpits raw, lips cracked from the sun.
It's so interesting to me that when Taylor Branch talks about the civil rights movement and the individuals of the civil rights movement, he has such an intimacy because he was reading their taped conversations from the FBI. He interviewed people. He understands the importance of Americans understanding what the civil rights movement was, that it wasn't just Rosa Parks sat down on the bus and refused to get up, and Martin Luther King led a march, and then everything was kumbaya. He knows that we need to understand the process, the history, the context, the nitty-gritty of what was going on. There was a lot of brutality. We are a nation that has tried to heal from that, but he wants us to look at the complexity of what was going on during the Civil Rights Movement.
I want people in my writing to have a sense of wonder at its best that this was going on behind the scenes of something that I thought that I knew about, so that there's a sense of discovery there.
The National Archives was created so that the American people can hold their government accountable for their actions. This is a good example of how, because we have captured this information, he was able to tell the story.
I use the National Archives for my research almost constantly. Certainly the presidential libraries, starting with the Kennedy Library and even the Eisenhower Library, and more time than anywhere else in the Johnson Library.
We wanted to recognize a scholar who has used the records of this institution so that we could let other people know all of the things that are here. And there's no one better than someone like a Taylor Branch, who's won a Pulitzer, whose work is widely read, whose work will be read 100 years from now. You know, in addition to this amazing Pulitzer Prize winning trilogy that Taylor Branch wrote, he's also written about the NCAA and some of the corruption and some of the scandals with the NCAA. He really was President Bill Clinton's memoirist.
It was an amazing experience too. One of the things I was trying to communicate is just what it's like for a historian. I mean, by day, I'm sitting there wrestling with Martin Luther King and, you know, the Vietnam War and everything, and then I'd get a call, can you be at the White House at 10 o'clock? And it was like parachuting into another universe. My role is to get as much information that's new and valuable and authentic on this tape as possible for the future.
They're a fascinating piece of history, and there will come a time when those things will be available, will be released many years from now. And it's going to be a unique kind of oral history of that presidency, that period of time.
What has struck me in the times when I've met Taylor Branch is that he is still that guy going through those tapes, opening up those books, looking through those dusty volumes, finding the stories, wanting to be able to help Americans understand themselves and understand their history.
The last year, Ferguson, Baltimore, Staten Island, these things have shown us how much work there is to do. Everywhere you go, the place where we are residually at war with ourselves, still. You scratch the surface and underneath it is either a racial fear or a hostility that only requires a spark. Who we are, how we got to this point, and how we get to the next horizon, you know, Taylor's attending to that. He's doing very, very important work.